All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
What is up, guys? This is Real Estate with K&J. I'm Kyle. He's Justin. Today we are wrapping up our seller series. We got through it pretty good. The first time we started talking about it, we got into just kind of the whole breakdown of what to expect from front to back, and then we kind of talked about in the second part of it the importance of making your house look good, how our upkeep goes, just as far as updates and things like that. Today, we're going to talk about the marketing behind it, what you need to do once we're getting ready to list, and then kind of going through the whole process from the seller's perspective like we did with the buyers. But to start, I think we're going to get into the market a little bit because we've been slouching a little bit. We've been on a bit of a hiatus here. Justin was out in Vegas getting all educated and whatnot, and flying solo is just not a thing that I like to do. So
I feel that 100%. Yeah. Going to Vegas, I'll tell you what, though, definitely recommend going next year because that it was so insightful, learned a lot, got you motivated, it kind of sparked the fire inside you once you get back. So that was awesome. But I'm ready to dive into it and let these people know what we do for marketing.
awesome, dude. So let's start with just kind of the market as a whole. So right now I'm looking
Yeah.
at the MLS here, and active and coming soon. There's only 673 right now. How's it looking from your end? Because on my end, it's still kind of crazy. I mean, so just to kind of put it into perspective for people, last year when the market was hot, it was crazy. We have half as many houses as then when it was considered low inventory. So, yeah, what are you
Yeah.
kind of seeing out there?
So, I mean, I've been busy. I've been, lots of buyers looking, more and more houses are starting to hit the market.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, looking at that number, it's a low number, on a typical normal market, we're looking at, thousands of listings, but we're at a fraction of that. But, even with interest rates starting to go up a little bit more, it's still a good time to buy just because of the interest rates still being historically low. So, I mean, I've been pretty busy, got a couple listings coming up too. So that'll be nice to bring additional inventory to the market for the buyers that are looking. But yeah, other than that, it's been steady. It's been busy. And I think going into the next few months, it's going to pick up even more.
What's the first thing you're telling your buyers when you kind of like make first contact with them and they're like, hey, we're ready to start looking? What's the market like? We don't really know. We're not kind of plugged in. It's just kind of like, hey, it's kind of this part of our life where we feel like it's time to get a home. What are you
Yeah.
telling them
So
first?
yeah, so buyers that come to me, I tell them that patience is key,
That
because
was
with
exactly what I was gonna say.
patience is key with the lack of inventory. It may take some time to find them something, and once we do find them something, I tell them to be prepared to go against other people because majority of the listings, as soon as they hit the market, they're at least getting a handful of offers, sometimes like two handfuls, sometimes
Yeah.
10 plus. So that's why I tell them to just be ready, be patient, and then just hang with me because regardless, we're gonna get it done and we're gonna find them something.
Oh yeah, and that's the big thing I always try and tell them too is try not to get too competitive. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, um, you want the house, or else you're not going to be writing on it, but don't put yourself in a situation where financially all you're doing is paying for your home because you really wanted to just win this one. We put 3 offers out 3 weekends in a row, and you just want something to stick, you know? And then you realize halfway through the process, like, man, I kind of wish that it wouldn't have been this house. You know what I mean?
You're
So
right. I
it goes
agree.
back to the patience thing too, though. Yeah, and that's a big thing. And there's a lot of different tools that we can use for people that have, excess cash and things like that. But for people that don't, I'm working with someone right now that's going through OFA, and that's a program through Toledo that basically helps you with your down payment assistance. And, we're turning some of those out in 30 days. So that's a big, awesome tool. I guess on the other side of it, though, kind of leading into where the podcast is going today, what are we telling sellers and when you throw that sign in the yard, hey, it's day one on the market, here's what to expect?
Yeah. So I mean, with sellers, what I tell them is, when we throw the sign in the yard and we start doing our marketing, social media presence, putting it on websites, flyers, door knocking, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
I tell them that, you may get overwhelmed with showings just because of the lack of inventory, the amount of buyers that are out there. There, most of the time, if I list a house on a Friday, that whole weekend is booked with showings just because of that reason. And what
Yeah.
I tell them is, try to, cooperate and well, not really cooperate, but try to make it make sense for them because they're going to have people coming in all day. I always recommend, go out of town for a weekend, go have some fun with your family and let these showings go through. And then by the time they get back, most of the time we have multiple offers, so that's why I tell them and to kind of prepare them for it. And plus that way too, they only have to clean their house once.
Yeah.
And then when they go out of town, it's just easy breezy.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And kind of that flexibility of like getting a plan together, like we've talked about before.
Right.
It's such a big deal because some people be like, well, if we can get like 24 hours, because doesn't that seem reasonable to ask for? But when you're trying to get the top dollar for your market or for your home in this market, excuse me, it's like sports. The best ability is availability. If you have to kind of
Right.
schedule out and then, you can go and show one house, but you can't go show this one until tomorrow, maybe that you lose a buyer there. Or that buyer just gets spent, they throw an offer out there, they go chips all in on this one, and then it's like, oh, we'll just hold off on this one.
Right.
That's one instance. You can do the dance and kind of like try to be out of the house for like a day. Batman's 3 hours long, so you could go see that.
Right.
Just a long due day out with the family is a kind of a nice way to kind of, like you were saying, just get out of the way because it can get crazy.
Right.
There was one that I was showing just last week. I think it had, what was it, 26 showings between the 2 days.
Yeah, I had one
Turned
similar
into
where it was
14
3 days
offers.
and 80 showings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, it's nice. It is picking up traffic wise. I mean, there's more buyers out there. I think the inventory will start to get going as people get a little more comfortable. Um, yeah, so you guys head out of town and we get all these showings. They come back. What are we expecting as sellers to come home to in this market? Say we're priced appropriately. We got the house stage looking good. We went coming soon. We got all the marketing and things like that done. And we know the showings are coming. We have, we'll say, 20 or so showings. What are we expecting once we pull back in the driveway and talk to you?
Yeah, so once they pull back in the driveway, that at that point, more than likely we have multiple offers, whether it's a handful, two handfuls, whatever the case may be. And then, so once you as a seller come back in town, that's when we sit down, go over all the offers and essentially pick the one that best suits your needs. So, it could be, the only thing that matters is price, could be possession time, could be how quick can we get this sold type of thing. But you know, us as realtors, we'll go through all these offers, break it down to so that way, you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at all the terms that come in with these offers. And then, of course, we make recommendations on, this is a better offer than this one. But at the end of the day, it's what you as a seller want to accept and, what best suits your needs.
Yeah, what I like to do is I'll treat each offer like it's its own individual thing. Like we have one offer, and I'll say, hey, here's when we're closing, hopefully, with everything goes smooth. Inspection, right. Here's what they're looking at inspection wise. If they're asking for an inspection, if they're asking for a home warranty, we throw that in there. And then we just kind of break down what the seller's going to net. And then we kind of just go down the line. And like, hey, this is a contender, this one isn't. And then if they're real close, kind of just goes back to what we were talking about with our buyer series, being pre-approved with the local lender. That goes a long way to getting to the finish line, even from a seller's perspective. The home warranty is another thing, and then like you said, what do they need? Are they going to do they have 30 days after closing if they need to find a place or just get moved? And then also on top of the 30 days, we're looking at, title company. Some of these sellers have obviously bought a home before and now they're selling it and they've worked with certain places and they're like, hey, this works for us. We've worked with them and it's just, it wasn't it. Comfortability, maybe they know somebody, things like that. It's just the littlest things in this market that'll kind of, tip the scale in one direction or another because there's like so many offers, right? That it's just one little thing here, one little thing there. Another thing is, appraisal gaps are a big deal now, just because, people are offering so much that sellers want to make sure they have that guaranteed money. just like we talked about in the buyer series, and even just now having like the down payment assistance and whatnot, buyers, it's not a foreign thing to ask for closing costs. Well, now, I mean, there's in some instances you got to offer to pay the seller's closing costs just so that you have that little tiny edge. There's little things like that, little creative things that you can try to do to get your offer noticed. And that's what we're looking at when we're at the table with our clients. So the whole process then, is just very similar, but on the opposite side of the table, basically, as the seller. Once the inspections are done, if there is any, by the buyers, we look at what they found, what they need to have fixed. If it's an FHA thing, it's a little different than, hey, the buyer's asking for a new roof kind of thing.
So yeah, going into that, kind of piggyback off it. Once we do, when we sit down, of course, going through all the terms, make sure everything's good. And then as the process, as they accept an offer, once we do get to an inspection, like you mentioned, looking at or getting repairs back from the buyers that say we want a new roof or handrails done or this chip paint. And, some of the repairs that they ask for could be, serious safety repairs that, at that point in time that if those aren't done, the deal's not moving forward. So as a seller, you have to put those things in perspective. And, some things maybe pointing out that you as a seller didn't even know because so you bought the house 10 years ago and you had an inspection then. Over time, things happen and there's a lot of unknowns that you can't see unless you're looking for them. So, getting the inspection addendum back with those repairs, that's something to consider as well. And then, like you mentioned, if there's any repairs required for the appraisal, most of the time, as if I'm working with a buyer and I see them in an inspection report, I put them in the addendum. So that way we can just be proactive. So once we do get to the appraisal and, on the appraisal, the appraisers, they take note of any repairs for the loan, at that point, we can touch base on those, or they are already done just because of the inspection period and the addendum that was sent over by the buyers.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit too when we had JP on, that sellers sometimes, which isn't a bad thing to stay kind of on top of it, is have their home inspected prior to even listing, just so that some of those things aren't, snuck up on them. And it's like, oh, hey, plot twist, you have a bunch of mold in your crawl space, or the roof is actually on its last legs. You work, you work at Jeep, we'll say, and you're there 5-6 days a week and you're not a roofer and you don't realize that your roof is not in great shape. So just kind of having things like that. Appraisal is another kind of big thing on the list from either side. Worst case scenario is probably that it doesn't appraise, right?
Right. Oh yeah, because then if it doesn't appraise, then at that point in time, it's a whole different ball game. And of course, you gotta try to come to an agreement. And then like you touch base on, like what we touch base on with the appraisal gap, that's when that comes in play. And definitely if an offer has that, it makes things more, it sweetens the deal, just because if we run into that instance where the appraisal does come in under, you have the appraisal gap to get you to X dollar, so that's
so for example,
cool thing to have.
If we list the house, we'll say, just keeping it low, we'll say we list the house at 90,000 and we get an offer at 100,000 with a $5,000 appraisal gap. And then the appraiser comes out and he's like, man, this might be the nicest house on the block, but houses over here are they're just not going for that much. And your house just doesn't offer, $100,000. And he only appraised it for 85. Well, with the $5,000 appraisal gap, you as the seller, you're still going to get your $90,000.
Right. And then that way, you don't get the full 100,000 that you accepted. And of course, as a seller, that's something that you're like, wow, I was really looking forward to making this amount off the $100,000 offer. But, at the end of the day, and what people need to put in perspective is, the appraisers, they dictate the price regardless. Us as realtors, we do, CMA. So we come up with the value of the house. We look at the same comps that most appraisers do, but sometimes, they have a different opinion, and that's when you run into that instance. And of course, discouraging, but at the end of the day, if you accepted an offer with an appraisal gap, you're covered and you're getting guaranteed money essentially.
Yeah. And the other thing too is I've been running into with FHA buyers, just kind of another thing to look at when you're looking at your offers, is that they're like an inspection or FHA waiver up to a certain dollar amount, hey, we got all these things on this list of things from our inspection. We don't want to have to deal with this, and that. We got a grocery list from the buyers. Well, those kind of things kind of alleviate that and can make your offer a little more attractive. And then that's kind of the big discouraging thing about FHA offers too, is when these appraisers come in, it's the same kind of thing. Are they going to flag me for this or that? Are they going to flag this? Well, if you do that little gap, the buyer assumes that you don't have to worry about it. And that's kind of another thing that throws most sellers off. I mean, for good reason. It just is another bump in the road to kind of get over when you're talking about having to do FHA repairs. It's just one more thing. It's not difficult to do a lot of them, but it is just another hump where, like you were talking about earlier, what are your needs? Is it a cash offer? No inspection? There it is.
Right.
Clear title, and then we're out of there. So yeah, then on closing day as a seller, it's a little different than not much to what are you expecting once you're headed to the closing at the title company, other than what the buyer, they're getting their keys or signing off all their stuff for this loan, they're getting their interest rate and all that stuff locked in. What's the buyer looking at over on their side of the table? Or the seller,
Yeah.
excuse me.
So as a seller, once you get to the closing table, they're gonna want you to, sign over the title, the deed, and everything. So you're just signing over ownership.
Mm-hmm.
As a buyer, you have many more documents just because you're going through a lender and all that too, lock in your interest rates and so on and so forth. So closing for a seller, it's much quicker. And then of course it depends on when possession is. If possession's at closing at that point in time, as a seller, you'll bring your keys, garage door openers, and etc. to closing to, at that point in time, hand over to the buyers once paperwork signed, funding's done, and you get paid. Of course, if it's like 30 days after closing for possession, you at 30 days after closing, that's when you hand over keys, and those type of things. And regardless of when you hand over possession, at that point in time, that's when you can call utility companies and those type of things to get them, out of your name and into the buyer's name, because the buyers, they're going to be working on doing the same thing at closing, calling utility companies, getting water, gas, electric, whatever the case may be, putting their name. But, as a seller, that's what you can expect. And, most of the time the closing goes fairly quick just because, you're not signing all the documents that the buyer is. You're just signing over, handing over ownership to the buyers through, transferring the deed, title, and so on and so forth.
So that's kind of the front and back of it. If we're in this market, and then just kind of not as many documents if you're financing. If it's cash, it's usually like what, a handful of documents, same as
Documents. Yeah, it's
check,
quick. It's easy breezy.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
FHA offer though, I mean, you're looking at like, a stack, like a cartoon size stack. There's a lot of them. So yeah, make sure that your hands are well rested the day before closing if you're financing a house. All that stuff is kind of just in the recent memory as far as like marketing, and you talked about it a little bit. A lot of our work kind of goes on the front end of this. So that's what to kind of expect in this market when we're going to get heaps of people. When it's a little bit more even, say, what are some things that we do on the front end, like you were talking about, to, get this house seen, whether it's open houses or just the marketing that we do with Remax.
Yeah. So, I mean, going into marketing that we do, we have a big presence in our market just because we're backed by Remax. So that definitely helps out with the brand. It makes the house more known. And of course, we dive in onto social media. That's something I'm big on, social media marketing, because majority of people, I believe there's a study, about 82% of people check Facebook at least once a day or are on Facebook for like 3 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And so posting it on social media, you get that attention, you get the traction that you want just because everyone's on there. And then of course we run ads through a program called AdWorks. And what's cool about it, is once someone clicks on your house, let's say they're on 13 ABC looking at the news or whatever, they click on your house and they go to Facebook, that ad follows them everywhere. So on top of, having an online presence, social media, and just websites in general, we do open houses. And I like marketing those just because it gives a chance for, 2 hours on a Sunday to get as many buyers through as possible. And sometimes, it brings offers to the table just because it gives them a chance. Or if their schedule's busy and this is the only time they have that opportunity. So, those three things on top of, one of the things that I like to do is network within our office. Our office is huge. We have over 100 agents. So, talking to them on a day-to-day and being in the office, that helps get your house sold too, because we're talking to them like, hey, got this coming soon listing. I know you saw it. If you guys have a buyer, put in a showing, and this is what the house is about. It's updated kitchen, da 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 da, and then boom, we can try to sell it that way. And then of course too, another thing that I'm starting to do is go around the neighborhood of that house, go knock on neighbors' doors, because most of the time the neighbors have a family member or friend who wants to live close to them. So that
Sure.
may be another opportunity to get an additional buyer, an additional offer
Mhm.
for your house.
Yeah, and how many times have you had like heard of that or even thought that? Like, man, it would be so dope if I could just run away from home and just go next door and it's my best friend's house. You know?
Dude, exactly. Because that's what people think too. Because, especially if it's like a lifelong best friend, or if
Yeah.
it's like the parents live in this neighborhood and the kids are looking, they want to be
Yeah.
close to their parents, especially if they have a kid. So,
Yeah.
that way they got the babysitter right next door. So
Hmm.
those type of things are things to consider. And that's what we do, as realtors and, as anyone's agent, we go above and beyond just because we look for these opportunities to get your house sold.
Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying with, marketing within our office, we have over 100 agents, but on top of that, we have the highest volume in the city as far as, our brokerage goes. So, you're looking at almost 23 deals per agent on average, which is
Right.
about 7 or 8 higher than the next closest. So, I mean, all of these agents are busy. It's not just a couple of people with, oh, hey, I'm with Remax. I'm here sometimes. All these people are moving with a lot of different clients. So you're going to get the exposure that, would be expected going with Remax. For example, I just had one at the weekend. There's only, what do we say, 673 on the market right now, active and coming soon.
Yeah.
And my buyer's looking for a very niche kind of property, and it just happened to slip through the cracks. I didn't see it. And then I was on Facebook, just like a buyer or seller would be, and I saw a listing that Susie Joyner had, and it's perfect. Sent it right over to him. I'm like, hey. So, and then the listing alert is another great resource that we have right now where it's kind of, in-house stuff where you have to work, you have to be with a Remax agent to kind of see these things, or from a seller's perspective, it's to kind of avoid the herd that we were talking about earlier. You just kind of want to find one deal, get the house sold for a fair price instead of having to deal with, all these showings that could possibly come. You have a good home. You've lived there. You've taken care of it for, 15, 20 years, we'll say. You just want it to go to, a qualified buyer and get a fair deal done. You don't need, 19 offers and all these other things. And yeah, so that's just kind of what we offer over here. As far as the seller series goes, we're probably about wrapped up with that.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna get into some neat stuff. We're gonna see if our broker John can come on here soon. We're gonna get out and about a little more, so we're gonna keep the podcast rolling, but we're gonna try and start doing some more like tours of some older homes in the area, some historical places that are like downtown, and in other parts of the city. Just more creative stuff, and kind of just following, us on the daily. Is what we're going to try and get into a little more, but keeping the podcast and getting you guys introduced to some of the local vendors that we know, whether it's inspectors, title people, lenders is a big one, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Home staging, landscapers, all kinds of stuff to make your home look awesome. Even if you're not looking to buy or sell, just knowing like, hey, we can tune in here, and these guys have probably talked to somebody in the industry before. So
Yeah, most definitely. And yeah, moving forward, looking forward to it. And then yeah, like I said, when we highlight, local community places as well, that's something that, want to get into. So if anyone has any recommendations of a place that, we can go stop by and just highlight their business and have a conversation with, feel free, let us know, shoot us a text, phone call, whatever the case may be, because we'd love to help them out, highlight them as a local business, and make it kind of get more traction for them themselves, and then of course give you guys some insight on some cool places.
yeah, man, lots of exciting stuff, but kind of getting into the buyers and sellers thing to start this whole process for us, I think was something that needed to happen. Obviously, we are
Oh,
realtors.
yeah.
That's the biggest part of what we do. So, obviously, we're going to hit on some of those things. We'll kind of keep doing market updates, but I'm excited for what is next. So, any final thoughts?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, great. We'll talk to you guys soon.